Hey, this video is about just kind of like an addition to another video I made, which is called the Dynamic Scalability of Teams. It's an idea that I kind of introduced last year, and one of the thoughts at the back of my mind when I was making this video is that certain industries need to be matured, but the mechanisms by which we have largely done that in the past is through the creation of companies and then with the application of capital and resources for the purpose of accomplishing a task. So you can kind of go about and get into the details of how that's being done. If you want to incentivize growth in a particular area, then you fund basic research, and then out of which you have hopefully a wave of innovation in the form of entrepreneurship coming in, taking that research. You spread the risks, so you kind of spread the risks across, I don't know, a couple of hundred teams, and then one of them kind of capitalizes upon the research and turns it into the breakthrough that the market seeks. I think that's the formula in a nutshell. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert. I know very little about how things work from a systems perspective or point of view when it comes to things like that. But I think that's how the system has, by and large, funded uh, growth, if you want to call it. I think there are efficiencies to be had when it comes to that system, but there's also limitations. The design of the system kind of places limitations because it has to go through so many hurdles. So, one of the questions I pose in my mind kind of sounds ridiculous at first thought, but it's kind of another one of those hard problems. When I was making this video, I said this is a hard problem, and the video you see on the screen, and I said, but then I kind of get into the details and kind of chip away at it one, you kind of eat the elephant one bite at a time. But coming back to what I was talking about, my original thought was, what if work's happening all over the place, all over the time, and it's just happening? I think that's one of the comments I made in this video as well. So I thought about this a little bit more, and I think I've gotten a taste of how something like the vision I have, which is not an original vision. Steve Jobs kind of anticipated a workforce of the future like that, and I'm pretty sure many others have envisioned a workforce, a kind of marketplace of the future where work's happening all over the place, all over the time, in a synchronized yet distributed fashion. And I just want to kind of, like I said, I got a first taste into something like this because I have been recently fortunate enough to engage in a kind of activity that's known as mob programming. And the Wikipedia page doesn't do justice. It kind of explains it as different individuals or teams working together at the same time in the same collaborative space at the very least in a digital sense. You kind of use the same resources in order to be able to achieve an objective. And the thing that kind of really opened up my eyes to the potential, like I was just kind of thinking of an idea in December, and now I'm actually doing something like this. This is like the beauty of ideas. So here's what happens in the mob programming class that we do. 5 or 6 individuals get together at a predetermined time. We have an objective. None of us, well, one of the leaders knows more than everybody else. Everybody else on the team has different skill sets, different levels. Each one of us has our strengths and our weaknesses. We take turns driving the initiative. So we kind of, one person is the driver, two or three people are making the giving step by step instructions to the driver on what needs to be done. Everyone can kind of see each other's work. There's transparency. We kind of share our screens. The code is all obviously there, right there for us to use. We use like a bunch of other collaborative tools. And within a span of an hour and a half, 2 hours, we have accomplished the task. So, like for a person like me who doesn't know a lot about Android development, for me to actually complete that task and get a working app up and running within a session is huge. It's mind-boggling. Something like that would have taken me at least 6 or 7 hours to kind of 4 or 5 hours at the very least to kind of figure it out on my own, and I'm able to kind of shrink the time substantially and achieve the objective. So, like I said, everyone kind of comes along and provides their provides a different set of experiences when it comes to technical acumen or different ways of looking at the problem, reframing the problem, being creative. Um, and the sum is always larger than the individual. That's like really the key point. So this is, I think, a really fascinating development in terms of distributed systems. I think this there's something really huge and significant here. Um, it can help us get to the creation of many industries in the future, and it's just going to be one of the major developments. Obviously, this is the natural evolution of things kind of branch off from how they started. Like, look at crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, how diverse of a growth that's been uh, ever since the term crowdsourcing was even coined, which is, I think, it was about 10 years ago. Jeff Howe did it, I believe, if I remember the name correctly. But these are all big movements now: crowdsourcing, crowdfunding. And when we kind of look at, so I've kind of mapped, the list is growing. I have another paper based list, but I've kind of identified 19 areas on Singularity Hub on a blog post that Peter D. Mandy's just that he made in October last year, and I kind of hijacked his blog post with the comments I provided. And it's like a whole bunch of things I have personally identified that we need to mature in order to be able to sustain our collective future. So all the way from reversing climate change with a focus on sequestration to space, CRISPR, advances in food production, synthetic biology, competition in general. There's a whole bunch of things I kind of go through. In order to get to such a vision and more, it's a collective vision. Obviously, it's nothing is there's no such there's very few original ideas. I think, anyways, but in order to be able to get to such a vision, we need to redefine how work is conducted, which kind of forces you to go into a lot of different areas and make sense out of it all and pull it together in a cohesive vision. I think mob programming would be a part of it. Distributed teams working together in a collaborative environment in order to be able to achieve a single objective. So you take that, so say like you take that example, right? And say Elon Musk has decided that he is going to make use of crowdsourcing in the form of mob programming. And Elon has mentioned that in order to be able to do something like that, we are going to need an injection of, I don't know, let's pull a number, $10 billion and some thousands of man hours. Now, if Elon kind of went through the traditional sources only, it's going to take a long time to raise that amount of money and accrue the kind of talent that's needed in order to be able to get the kind of vision that's he's thinking, which is make life interplanetary, set up a colony on Mars, another colony on the moon, beam internet from space, beam energy from space, get the interplanetary network going, and a bunch of other things like creation of a spaceport, um, different propulsion systems, microwave kind of using microwaves to launch rockets, and a bunch of other things in the lab. But going the crowdsourcing route, Elon's able to, um, you know, raise that amount of capital through the high net worth individuals, through the public at large, by using a combination of those strategies. And using things like mob programming, tasks that would have largely been accomplished by uh, SpaceX employees in particular, some portion of those tasks is now taken and broken up into some kind of a mob programming construct. And the mob comes in, or I don't want to use the word mob. It should be called crowdsource programming, but I guess it's easier to call it mob. But the crowdsource engines are going to come in and help Elon chip away at those objectives one byte at a time. And through this mechanism, we would be able to retain, if not exceed, the quality of work, shrink the amount of time that's going to be, because I mean, it's the number of man hours, right? It takes a number of man hours dedicated towards a task in order to be able to move or complete that objective. So if you scale the teams, if you scale the size of the teams, then you can shrink the time. It's a mathematical equation. That's how work has largely been conducted throughout the times. It's what separates the smaller players from the bigger players. That's what separates a website running on a server underneath somebody's desks to an entire cluster of farms upon which entire startups are run, such as Amazon AWS. It's like the cloud. You call it the cloud. So scalability is the thing, and one of the ways to get there would be mob programming. So I kind of shared and that was just an example. That's one of the many examples. Like we can mature entire industries with a model like that. So watch out for crowdsourcing sites and their growth and crowdfunding, because that will be one of the major things that's going to change the world. It's going to be the thing that will drive a bulk of um, our growth in the future sense. I think it's one of the major movements that not just helps safeguard our collective future, but also power our dreams and open up the frontiers and forge a collective human destiny, and help make the world an amazing place, usher in the era of abundance. So mob programming has like the parallels I kind of started with or drew were, like when you look at a flock of geese and they fly in this V formation, there's beauty in this design, by virtue of how nature or evolution has um, powered it. So this is not a geese, but it's like geese kind of pretty much fly in this formation. So each one of the geese kind of following the leader, if you notice, they're slightly higher than the one in front of it. And the reason is because they're leveraging the thrust in order to be able to use the aerodynamics for the greater efficiencies in terms of keeping the entire team afloat. It's kind of just kind of physics, and the birds have somehow managed to figure these kind of things out. They also take turns being the leader. So if the leader, I have no idea what kind of cognitive kind of computations are involved when it comes to navigating the paths, the enormous distances that these birds travel all the way from South America to North America or from Florida to Alaska. I don't even know the migration paths, but it's pretty significant, man, how these birds with their tiny brains can figure this out. And if you spoke with Jim El Khalili, who's a pretty famous British scientist, he is of the opinion that there's some kind of a quantum biological nature happening, which helps the birds navigate. This is one of the things he mentions in this video that you see on the screen. Interesting video, very, very fascinating video, and a fascinating guy as well. So that was just kind of like a segue into how birds or nature has figured out in some respects what we are just figuring out. Um, but if we can do this, if you can define this problem succinctly and further work on cracking the problem of when it comes to the dynamic scalability of teams, then I think we could change the world. It's one of the major things, one of the major movements when it comes to helping bring about an unprecedented era of growth and prosperity. And like I said, chart a path towards a collective human destiny. Change the model, change the systems, maybe focus on doing everything in a decentralized manner, and you can do a lot done because you help remove the waste, the redundancy, the illogic, the flawed design, the limits, all these things that should not be there in the design. You get rid of it, you focus on what needs to be done, and you just go out and do it. So that was my video, and I'd love to hear your thoughts if you are also interested in things like mob programming, or if you kind of think about the dynamic scalability of teams in a near future sense. Awesome. Thanks.